Hello and welcome to Current Issues with me, Tarun. Our guest for today is Managing Director of Hindalco Industries and the Vice President of Aluminium Association of India, Mr. Satish Pai. To talk about Mr. Pai first, Mr. Pai has worked and lived in about 15 countries: Russia, Abu Dhabi, Oman, Angola, United Kingdom, United States of America and France, before coming to India and now taking over as the Managing Director of Hindalco Industries. In his capacity as a Vice President of Aluminium Association of India, he is taking up issues concerning the aluminium sector, which is actually going through a very tough phase, or shall we say a very challenging phase today. So, Mr. Pai, welcome. I would like to ask you, the aluminium industry in India is going through challenging times. Imports have crossed 51%. Given government's thrust on Make in India, the government must have panicked. What is the reaction and what are your expectations?
So I think that the imports being at this high level is now the second year running. And what is actually interesting is in the first quarter of this year, Indian aluminium growth grew 13% year on year. Okay. So in fact, worldwide, India is one of the few growth stories left. Okay. So the efforts of the government to stimulate industrial growth is actually happening. And aluminium consumption is going up. Now the sad news in the story is that imports have continued to keep pace. So we still, as you say, import about 52% of aluminium consumption in India is being imported. So various discussions going on with the government. Government is very supportive. We have a safeguard process that is ongoing. We have an anti-dumping for foil that is ongoing. We are currently discussing MIP with the government. And we are also talking about CVD, which is countervailing duties versus Chinese imports coming in. So a number of initiatives going. What the government has already done is that they have increased duty from 5 to 7.5% in the last budget. But I have to say that with that duty increase came the increase in cess on coal, yes, which, if you remember, Tarun, went from 200 to 400 rupees. Yes. So that sort of negated that 2.5% increase. So we are hoping now that the government would at least look at another 5% increase.
So what you're seeing is that 7.5% custom duty is no good. There needs to be some decisive measures to at least now get the industry back on track.
Correct. So we are hoping for at least another 5% that would take it to 12.5%.
Okay. What is the current capacity utilization of the sector as a whole and how is it affecting profitability?
So aluminium capacity in India is about 4 million tons, yes, and roughly 60% of that is being produced today. So we still have a long way to go. Okay. And Indian aluminium demand is projected to be about 3.2 million tons. 3.2 million yes. Tons. So Tarun, India is the 5th largest bauxite reserves in the world. So India should be an aluminium superpower. India should be meeting all its demand of aluminium as well as exporting aluminium. So it's pretty sad that 50% of the aluminium comes in from outside.
Pretty much in line with the Prime Minister's vision when he says that you have to make in India. Now, if you could tell us what kind of investments have gone into this sector and what is the overall depth that we are seeing?
So, you know, between us, Vedanta, Nalco, in the last few years, about 1.2 lakh crores of investment have gone in. Yes. And this has made this capacity of 4 million tons of aluminium, a lot more in alumina. So huge amount of investment has gone in. 7.5 lakh direct employees are employed by this sector. And I think that, you know, if you take the surrounding, probably double that number are employed. So aluminium is becoming a huge industrial sector. In fact, one of our requests to the government is that it should be declared as a core sector, so like steel.
I'll come to that question, but I want to ask you, you're talking of 1 million plus employment or maybe much more?
So currently it is 1 million plus because we have 7.5 lakh direct, and I think that probably an equal amount which is supporting the factories that we have, because you have contractors as well as direct employees. So yes, you have over 10 lakhs employees that are working in this sector.
I want to ask you a very important question. It relates to the doubling of the coal cess and the production cost of aluminium in the country. Now, if you could please tell me what difference has it made in terms of cost per ton with the coal cess doubling from 200 to 400 per ton, and how has it affected the industry's competitiveness?
Very simply, it requires 15 tons of coal to make 1 ton of aluminium.
Yes.
So if you have 200 rupees extra on 15 tons of coal, yes, that is the cost increase that you're seeing on the price of coal. So straight 15 into 200, 3,000 rupees a ton you have increased.
So when you're talking of 3,000 rupees a ton, Mr. Pai, how would you compete against the Chinese, against the Middle East manufacturers, I think, who I believe are cost competitive? How would you compete against these people? Because you're talking of exporting, you're not only talking of the domestic
That's
market.
correct.
So it simply outpaces it. I mean, you can't compete with these people.
Yeah, one thing is very clear, that 40% of the cost of a ton of aluminium is the cost of power. So when you are looking at imports coming into India, they come from the Middle East, which provides its smelters or aluminium industry with very low or cheap gas, and in China, where they have subsidized coal in the northwest of China. So you're quite right that competitively our whole discussion with the government is Indian industry has to be competitive on an international basis. We have to use the latest technology, efficiencies have to be matched. But let us at least compete on the same level playing floor. So if you have governments that give subsidy on coal or gas, then Indian industry needs to be protected, and hence our request for anti-dumping or safeguard.
I want to ask you what appeal you would make, given the fact, 13% of GDP is what is manufacturing. No country in this world, let alone China or America, has grown to be a developed nation with 13% as manufacturing growth rate. What appeal would you make to the government, the minister and the prime minister, in this regard, that if India wants to be a nation which grows developed, manufacturing needs to go up, and industries like yours, which are very crucial to the economy, perform better? What is your appeal when we talk of these things?
I think that, you know, the government, in all fairness, has got a very clear blueprint, which is the Make in India initiative, to get manufacturing to grow from, I think it's about 14 or 15% of the GDP now, to take it to at least 25%. Because if you want to be a developed country, your manufacturing sector should be at least a quarter of the overall GDP. So to do that, what is important for us? One is energy, which is the price of coal or power. And we have talked about coal. And I think here you have to admit that in the last year, the government has actually done a great job. Coal India's production has gone up. There is no shortage of coal in the country today. E-auction prices of coal and the recently held linkage are proof to the fact that at least on the coal cost side and the availability side, they have done a good job. The next thing that we need is infrastructure. So this is road, rail and ports. Here again, tremendous effort by the government going on. But I think really a lot more needs to be done, because we need more rail lines, we need more port facilities, because anybody importing aluminium to the west coast of India, let's take Silvassa, which is a big manufacturing hub. If you come from Dubai to Silvassa by ship, you pay $12 to $14 per ton cost of logistics. If you go from the central part of India or Orissa and you go to Silvassa, you're paying $60 to $70 per ton in transportation.
That is phenomenal.
So that is the logistics handicap we have. But we talked about energy. So that's why I'm saying the government initiatives on rail that they are pushing on, this is crucial to get the manufacturing center in India working.
So Mr. Pai, when you pitch, you're pitching for an integrated approach. It's not about aluminium sector specific initiatives, but you also need initiatives in the transport and logistics sector. That's a very important point. Now going ahead from here, a study group on coal royalty was formed in the year 2014. I think it was the month of June. This study group will soon give its report, submit its report. In between, we saw a lot of states saying that anyways the central government has doubled its cess. Now even our royalties must go up from 14% to X percentage. That is one. Otherwise you share the coal cess. So this is a state center battle, but the industry is going to be the loser in this. Could you share with us that if the cess, if at all there is a decision where it goes up, we are given to understand that central government is not playing ball. It says that the industry can't afford more coal royalty rates to go up, and we won't even share the coal cess, because cess is a central tax. It can't be shared with the states. Now, how would you explain to the government that with every % increase in coal cess, not only your competitiveness gets affected, the cost to the consumer for all, I mean, it's not aluminium, it's not steel, but even power that we use, everything goes up. How do you explain this to the government?
I think the government probably understands this. That's why they have already told the states that the industry cannot take any more cess or taxes on coal. I think coal in India is already at the pithead, quite expensive, not because of the lifting cost of coal, which is quite competitive. It's because of various cesses and taxes. So I think the industry's point of view is very simple. I don't think we can afford for the price of coal to go up. This current phase, the last 6 to 8 months, has been good to us because coal has been available and e-auction prices have been reasonable. I think for the competitiveness of not just aluminium but any industry, we would need power to be at reasonable price. I'll just give you some numbers. I just saw one of our biggest competitors in China, their coal cost is 1.6 rupees a unit.
Oh my God.
And our average price is between 3.5 to 4 rupees in unit. So, you know, this is why the price of energy is fundamental to industrial development.
I would
in
want
India.
to ask you, since you spoke of China, now China is a mystery to many Indian businessmen, or at least businessmen say so. In the aluminium sector, if we speak, how are they able to price products so low that you outpace the competition? I mean, competition can't think of matching her. How is that possible?
I think that, you know, China took a strategic decision 10 years ago that aluminium is the metal of the future.
Yes.
So they invested huge amounts to build capacity. 10 years ago, India used to produce more aluminium than China. Today, China produces 31 million tons and we produce 3
That's a
million
revelation.
tons. Yes.
Did this happen only in past decades?
Last 10 to 15 years, that is what the aluminium industry in China grew.
So there are 31 million tons and we are just 2.5.
3 million tons.
3 million tons.
Yes. So I think that the government there took an initiative to say we are going to grow the aluminium. They took an initiative to say this is going to create jobs, and as you know, in China they are very much focused on maintaining the social harmony.
Yes.
So they have provided, you know, as the aluminium prices go up and down because it's controlled by the London Metal Exchange prices. I think the government there has provided various subsidies to the aluminium industry. Now they provide not just to the aluminium, they have done the same for iron and steel,
Yes.
which is why the iron and steel industry
You get
there,
dumped by the-
exactly.
Yes.
So it's not just for aluminium. I think Chinese government has provided subsidies to large sections of their manufacturing base because China was an export-based economy.
Yes.
So that is why they have provided all these subsidies.
Okay.
So that is their government's strategy on export based, which I think now they are going towards consumption based.
Yes.
So
When you spoke of the decadal increase where China went from say lesser than India to 31 million
Yes.
tons, I think that's the half the world's capacity in
it's
aluminium.
exactly slightly more than half actually.
Slightly more than half by
Yes.
only one nation. But Niti Aayog is coming out with a 15-year policy for various sectors. What is your appeal to Niti Aayog that can it come with some policy for the aluminium sector where for the next say about 15 years or so, which the policy's time frame, Amitabh Khan chairs
Yeah.
Niti Aayog, what is your appeal? Can we have a policy for aluminium to push the sector?
I think that it's really important, Tarun, and I'll tell you why. Aluminium is the metal of the future.
Yes.
Auto, electric lines, multi-storied buildings that come with urbanization, foil that is used for packaging, semi-rigid, all this is going towards aluminium.
Yes.
So whereas today there is a perception that steel is more important to the Indian economy,
Yes.
but 10 years from now aluminium is going to become more important. So I think it's very important that the Niti Aayog makes a policy for aluminium for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yes.
And then why India? Because India has the 5th largest bauxite reserves in the world.
Yes.
So you have the capacity, you have the raw material and the resources
Yes.
in India for it to become an aluminium superpower.
Mr. Pai, if invited by Amitabh Kant to submit before him a recommendation where you could say what is the potential of the aluminium sector and how could you contribute to employment, to make in India, to exports and foreign exchange, are you ready to go and
Yeah,
give
the
this kind-
Aluminium Association is already had a number of discussions and we are making various representations, and I think our most important point is that I think government is already realized the importance of aluminium.
Yes.
It should be declared as a core sector and we need to have a national aluminium
I'll
policy.
take it on from there. National aluminium policy, please tell us about that and why core sector. You must have some points to support this demand. What are those points? Could you tell us?
You see, as I said, I already described to you why aluminium is going to be important for the growth of India in the next 10 years.
Yes.
Declaring it at a core sector means that various arms of the government, whether it is railways, whether it's the Reserve Bank for financing, you get a number of initiatives that will, I think, help to grow the aluminium sector in India.
Okay.
Aluminium sector in India is not just the upstream which produces aluminium, but there is a huge downstream which makes wires, which makes plates, which makes closures, circle, foil. All this needs to grow. Where China has invested the most is not just on the upstream, it's in the huge downstream industry. So I think that declaring it at a core sector, giving the sort of financing options. Remember, China has not just subsidized coal and logistics, they have provided financing so that firms can start and invest more. So I think this is what is going to be required to grow the overall, not just the upstream, but the downstream sector in India as well. So it's important for that they declare it as a core sector.
Government always speaks of saving foreign exchange. How much foreign exchange can your sector save the government of India if you unleash your manufacturing potential to say about 90-95% or maybe 100%?
It's a good question, because we are importing into India 1.5 million tons of aluminium. So 1.5 million tons at roughly $1,800. Let's do the math, but it's a few $billion of foreign exchange that can be saved.
I think that should ring the right bells.
Yes.
We've got the 5th largest reserves of bauxite.
Yes.
And we've got the 4th largest reserves of coal. Do you see India has it in the wherewithal to become an aluminium superpower, say by 2025?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you have energy and you have bauxite, you have the human resources, this is a combination that is what is needed to make India an aluminium superpower.
Okay. The consumption of aluminium is increasing rapidly in defense, aerospace and automobile industry. In automobile, we see a lot of cars are rapidly switching to aluminium, not only for the basic body shells, but even for the engines. In defense, of course, it's used large scale. Do you expect a big market in defense production as a sector for aluminium?
I think that I personally see defense to be probably one of the biggest users of aluminium in the next 10 to 15 years. Because I think that, the government has taken large initiative to get defense manufacturing going in India. And if that happens, large parts, whether it's missiles, whether it's fighter jets, whether it's submarines, all this requires huge amount of high strength, high alloyed aluminium. So I think that defense is, besides auto, as you said, is going to be one of the largest users of aluminium.
That's pretty
going
interesting.
forward.
Now that the high or specialized or the best quality of aluminium is what you spoke of, I come to an aluminium which is called maybe scrap. Scrap imports have crossed 30%. What explanations would you like to give to the government of India that why has this happened and how at least we can avoid scrap imports?
So this is a very interesting point. You see, scrap is actually, aluminium is probably one of the most highly recyclable metals. In fact, you can theoretically recycle aluminium infinitely. So that is why, now why is so much scrap coming into India when we have so much aluminium production? Is that aluminium scrap is sold as a discount to the price of aluminium on the world markets. Now the duty on aluminium in India is 7.5%. The duty on scrap is 2.5%. So there's a 5% arbitrage, and this is the reason why there's so much scrap coming into India.
Okay, you mean that's the route also, that route can also be used?
Yes, so that is our push to the government has always been, you should keep a reasonable, if the aluminium is at 7.5, scrap should be at least 5%. Otherwise, more and more scrap. In fact, India is probably one of the world's largest importers of scrap. And scrap can become a bit dangerous, because if you're making electrical wires, you're making cooking utensils, you need to be careful about the quality of scrap.
But I'll bring that you to a question which speaks of what is called a zorba, a kind of scrap with radioactive elements.
Correct.
Now, India is a country, these are not my words, these are the words of current Coal Secretary Anil Swarup, who was early in the project monitoring group in the Prime Minister's office. Then he had said that Western nations are using standards to prohibit Indian exports. And India, in many sectors, are yet to have standards. So people from all over the world can dump stuff into India. And Zorba can be one of those things which is now being dumped, aluminium with radioactive elements. Do you think it's high time the government has standards to restrict at least radioactive aluminium imports?
So let's put it this way, we are actively working with the government standards body on standards for various aluminium scrap and other things coming into India.
Yes.
Because as you quite rightfully said, Japan, European Union, America has got pretty strict standards when things go into their country.
Yes.
And I think that as India develops, we should be as conscious about what comes into our country.
Yes.
And I think that, we should not become overly protective, but reasonable precautions have to be taken.
Yes.
Because there is a lot of legitimate auto scrap that comes into India,
Yes.
which is highly alloyed, and I
Yes.
think makes perfect sense.
Yes.
But that should not then open the door for all, as you said, Zorba and other types of scrap, which could not, maybe is not as clean,
Yes.
should come into India unhindered and unchecked.
Has the government been sensitized to this reality?
I think they are very aware of it, and we are working now with them to get some standards in place.
For aluminium, you've got two core inputs, bauxite and also coal. In coal, you're already paying ad valorem duty, which is as per the value of the coal.
Yes.
Now, given that you're already paying it, would you feel that any other addition, now that the coal cess has already been done, would be harming the sector?
Let's put it that way. Our Aluminium Association would like the coal cess to be reduced.
That's a good point. Now we're speaking of bauxite. Indonesia stopped, put what you can say, full stop
Yes.
to exports of bauxite,
Bauxite.
way back in 2014.
Correct.
They also did it with other minerals. But India, despite having the largest bauxite reserves, would also import and imports bauxite, while we also continue to export bauxite. Do you think that we at least needs to have some kind of a restriction on export of bauxite till local demand is met? Because I think only one mine has been opened for bauxite exploration in the past 3 decades or so, if I'm not wrong.
I think there, Tarun, the actual point is not the import-export.
Yes.
The bauxite that is needed by the aluminium industry is on the east coast of India.
Yes.
And the bauxite that gets exported is on the west coast of India, which is
Okay.
from Gujarat. I think what is important is the last point that you made, which is that more bauxite mines are auctioned. There is,
That's an
you see,
important point.
Odisha has got 60% of India's bauxite.
Okay.
So I think that more bauxite mines being made available, maybe state mineral development corporations mining more bauxite and auctioning it like coal,
Yes.
are some of the ways where which we can get the bauxite to the Indian aluminium industry.
One comment I wanted on the LME prices falling. How is it impacting your business?
So see, LME is highly volatile right now, and in fact it has been very range bound. LME this year has averaged anywhere between $1550 to $1650. Just to put this in perspective, in last year, January, February, it was around $1900. Yes. Premiums which were at $400 are now at $70. Yes. So the overall cost, the realization of aluminium is dramatically down by nearly 25 to 30%.
Okay.
This has certainly affected the profitability of the aluminium companies quite a lot, because we have large debts. So it's not just the profit, EBITDA. We have to pay interest and we have to pay depreciation, yes, which I think is the part that gets lost by many people looking just at the cash profit. Yes. So I think that, for us, we would need LME to be at least between 1900 to 2000 for a healthy aluminium business in India.
Okay. Now we come to a section in our interview which is called the general segment. We ask you general and personal questions. Very quickly, we finished in about 2 minutes or so. The Indian companies have known not to invest in research and development. They've got very good top lines and bottom lines, but they're reluctant. Say R&D, okay, we can always get it from abroad. Yes. Do you think that hinders our growth as a nation?
Absolutely. I think that it's a very fair point. I think Indian industry has been buyers of technology rather than developers of technology.
Yes.
I made a public statement at one of our aluminium conferences that how come China that 10-15 years ago bought technology today sells aluminium technology to India.
Oh my God, that's a very significant improvement.
Yes. So I think it's a very fair point that Indian businesses, I think we have started to realize that in some sectors like IT and even pharma, we are catching up. But I think in some of our core manufacturing areas,
there is a lot to be done.
There's a lot to be done.
That brings us to my next question. Traditional manufacturing in India is known to be different than manufacturing companies in the West. You spend a large part of your career working across the globe in countries where working is a lot less hierarchical. People don't work in silos. and even the CEO can be seen going on the shop floor talking to people. Here CEOs sit in corner offices, and the
I go
dollars
to the
sort of-
shop floor.
so how do you see that changing in the coming
I
years?
think it's changing. I think it's already changing. I think there is a newer management that is already coming into Indian industry.
Yes.
I think that a lot of people that have worked internationally are working and heading Indian companies.
Yes.
I'm quite confident that Indian companies also will have management that, I think the point you're making is that we have a new younger generation,
Yes.
and the management now has to sync to this millennials
Yes.
generation,
Yes.
which is far more open, far more socially media active,
Yes.
and wants more communication.
No, when you said young, that brings me to my last three questions. First is, India is a tropical country, hot and humid. Why are traditional sector CEOs always in suits and ties everywhere? When we interview IT CEOs or even meet them otherwise, they are a bit. So is core sector more orthodox, or we have to see that new age or experience comes?
It's a good point. I think I started to wear more suits and ties after I came back
Is
to
it?
India.
Okay.
So I think, sir, there is always a corporate culture that you have to adapt to when you come.
Yes.
But I think that, these things are evolving, Tarun.
Yes.
And I think that, with time, these things are going to get better.
Yes, after spending in 3 decades in working in various, this one company 28 years and now Hindalco, what is your leadership style? Are you delegative, or are you centralized decision making is what you like? What is your mantra for leadership?
My basic mantra is that a successful CEO or a managing director is only as successful as the quality of people that he or she has around him.
Yes.
So which means that I believe in strong teams.
Yes.
And I grew up with a culture of delegation.
Yes.
So I like to empower people and then provide my support and backing from the back.
That explains much.
So that is the...
And my last question to you is, in addition to the government, a lot of young managers today would be watching your opinions on this interview also, who look up to you. What is your message to these young managers?
I think to the young managers, my only point is that, there is no substitute for hard work. A lot of people think today that they can become billionaires or millionaires in a space of 3 to 4 years.
Yes.
I think few of them will, but majority of them will have to work hard.
Yes.
And they will have to go on the shop floors or any other business they get in,
Yes.
and spend the years working hard and then coming up in life.
Yes.
My message is there is no shortcut to becoming a millionaire.
Mr. Pai, it was a pleasure speaking
Thank
to
you,
today.
Tarun.
So as we saw, Mr. Pai articulated that the aluminium sector in India has a huge potential given the rise of China, where it went past, where it was not even producing as much aluminium as India, and now it's at 32 million tons. India can not only make aluminium in India, but export and can become an export powerhouse. But the current situation is that aluminium imports have crossed 51%. The government must step in with measures like MIP or anti-dumping duty, or increase the customs duty. Let us see what steps the government takes. We will track all that for you on News World India. Thank you so much for joining us on Current Issues on today's interview. Thank you.